I am here to introduce our glorious keynote speaker, Dr. Jason Roop. Dr. Jason Roop is a visionary leader, researcher, and educator dedicated to transforming addiction recovery and behavioral health through evidence-based, strength-focused interventions. As the founder and CEO of the Center for Trait-Based Transformation, Dr. Roop has pioneered the trait-based models of recovery and prevention, innovative approaches emphasizing strengths, leadership, and personal empowerment. His groundbreaking work has significantly impacted mental health outcomes, reduced stigma, and increased long-term engagement in recovery and prevention programs nationwide. With over 2 decades of experience spanning behavioral health, higher education, workforce development, and nonprofit leadership, Dr. Roop has successfully designed and implemented transformative programs integrating leadership development, character strengths, and effective recovery strategies. His expertise has led to collaborations with universities, treatment centers, government agencies, and national organizations to reshape addiction, recovery, and prevention. Drawing deeply from his personal journey of overcoming 17 years of addiction, Dr. Roop is passionately committed to advancing person-centered, innovative treatment methods. He currently serves on the Kentucky Opioid Abatement Commission, guiding strategic initiatives supporting statewide prevention, treatment, and recovery. An award-winning leader, Dr. Roop received the prestigious 2024 Burns-Brady Innovator of the Year Award for transformative contributions to addiction recovery. As a highly sought-after speaker, he has presented at prominent national conferences, like this one, and his research on leadership traits in individuals with substance use disorders has been featured in multiple peer-reviewed journals. Please put your hands together for Dr. Jason Roop. Forward, that one goes back.
Okay, gotcha. Well, thank you, Lindsay. That was a wonderful introduction, and this conference is by far the top of the class, you could say. Yeah, my name is Dr. Jason Roop, and I just want to honor ARHE for creating this space here today, and I thank all of you for the wonderful work that you do on the daily. To help transform lives and to erase and mitigate shame and stigma. So I applaud the efforts you're doing. I applaud the history of this city and the peoples of this city. And again, it's such an honor to be here with you today. And as Lindsay had mentioned, I wear several hats, so to speak. I am founder and CEO of the Center for Trait-Based Transformation. I'm also a professor of business and leadership at a couple of different universities. And as Lindsay had mentioned again, I was the 2024 Innovator of the Year, the Burns-Brady Innovator of the Year, voted by YPR Louisville. But I wasn't born Dr. Jason Roop. Spent 17 years in active addiction. I've been arrested 18 times. I've overdosed 4 times. I've been raided by the police twice, and actually both times was by the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. I wound up homeless in late 2012, and in fact, I got kicked out of the homeless shelter because I was sneaking in crystal meth. So in December 2012, I really was homeless, living on the streets, and fortunately, I was able to find a way to treatment, and I showed up to the front doors of this treatment center in Central Kentucky in October 16th, 2013, and I've been sober ever since. And so, again, thank you. Thank you. And what I noticed when I was there in treatment, and look, I was there in residential care for a year. And while I was there, I noticed that a lot of the other clients likely felt just like I did. And it was that we thought the very best thing that we could do would be to just get out of the way, to not cause any more pain and suffering in our communities, that we could just kind of move to the side, so to speak. We felt like monsters. And no doubt there were other people who had rap sheets or histories that were as extensive as mine, but what I noticed is that there was a lot of great good taking place inside that treatment center that nobody was talking about. I've seen guys convince others to not leave treatment because that would have meant a fatalistic outcome. I've seen guys that were volunteering to help those in the community. They were starting study groups. Several would go on to continue their education and become administrators in higher education, become spiritual leaders in their communities, and I never forgot that. And after I graduated a year later, I got married to my beautiful bride, Amanda Jo. She's sitting right here. We got married on October 24th, 2014, and then I graduated rehab October 25th, 2014. So that was a busy weekend for me. And I never forgot what I observed. And then in 2019, I had the wonderful opportunity to pursue my PhD. And listen, here's something I'll share with you. I don't come from an academic family. My grandfather was a coal miner, and my dad was a coal truck driver with a 6th grade education. And so when the opportunity presented itself to get my doctorate degree, I was really kind of excited about it and also a little bit fearful when it came to that, but an advisor told me something that was so very helpful. And that advisor, Dr. Preston Jones, said, "Jason, the secret to this program, to being successful, is to pick a topic that you love to research every day." And so I kept coming back to this. And it was what I had seen while I was in treatment. And I began to ask and contemplate, and this actually would become the foundational research question of my dissertation. But when we talk about recovery, is the entire goal to completely overhaul someone from the inside out, top to bottom, left to right? Or are there good qualities that we can pull forward and build upon? And so that was the hypothesis of my study, that people in addiction possess highly effective leadership traits. And so I began to do the work, and there's nothing in the literature at the time about that. And so I began to piece it together, and over the course of 3.5, nearly 4 years, at the end of that time, I was able to validate that hypothesis. And of course, I had other researchers that were analyzing the data, because I'm going to be biased. I'm going to say, yeah, of course, people in addiction and recovery make highly effective leaders. But it held true. And so what I'm showing you right now is what emerged from the research. And you can see over on the left-hand side, that represents substance use disorder, or people that are in addiction. And what this research suggests, we're not saying 100%, but a very significant number, a majority, kind of define these qualities. And then on the right side, you see leadership. And that is defined by transformational leadership theory and authentic leadership theory. That's the framework for which we establish what makes someone a good leader. And then if you look in the middle, there's the 10 traits of the trait-based model of recovery. There's the traits that emerged from the research. Originally, it was 21 themes that were later distilled down into 10 traits. Those traits are resilience, tenacity, determination, empathy, emotional intelligence, appreciation, motivational, self-awareness, creativity, emotional intelligence, and authenticity. And what most people miss, while the connection is not made, and we're going to look at it a little more closely here in just a moment, but these traits are present within the lives of those who are in addiction. But those traits have been sabotaged, they've been hijacked, and they're being manipulated in their shadow form, and it comes across as something different. Look, I was arrested 18 times, but that never stopped me from getting high. I was determined to get high. You see where we're going? Yeah. And so this research began to really kind of capture and put words to something that you all have noticed and I had noticed. We just hadn't had the terminology for it before, but now we do. And the terminology is centered around leadership. And it's centered around transformation. And so what you're looking at here, of course, is the first publication that came from that research that I conducted during my dissertation, and then beyond that. Down in the bottom left, that's my mother. She's the original Dr. Roop. She never gave up on me. And then, of course, on the bottom, your right would be, of course, Amanda Jo again. And this represents something very, very significant. That when it comes to healing, when it comes to transformation, there's more going on than what meets the eye. And there's more dignity and self-respect and hope and purpose in the lives of not only those that we love and in our lives, but those lives that surround us. And when it comes to healing, our goal is not to erase someone in order to heal them. It's to help them realize who they really are. And so, the trait-based model recovery. After that research was published, I knew that there was more to be done. I knew that we had to make it accessible in a way that people could put their fingers on it, that they could somehow, this research, this understanding, could be applied to our personal lives so that people can experience positive transformation. So we began to construct the trait-based model recovery. What you're looking at now, of course, is the diagram that represents the 4 stages of trait-based. Now, this is not a linear modality, meaning that you don't go through phase 1, you complete that, then to phase 2, complete that, then 3 and 4. It's dynamic, just like the assessment that each and every one of you are going to take here in just a little bit. It's dynamic, it's not static, it's not to be stereotypical, it's fluid. As someone goes through the trait-based curriculum, they're learning about who they are. They're learning about their leadership traits. And the 4 phases not only include that trait identification, but solutions-focused therapy. We also have some components of IFS and Jungian psychology that you'll see here in just a little bit. But entrepreneurial opportunities. We've got an entire module focused on entrepreneurialism. Because, quite honestly, several of us had to be entrepreneurs in active addiction. We had to be innovative, we had to be creative, we had to be self-guided. That doesn't go away. We can actually use that quality, that experience as a foundational stepping stone on the recovery path. Additionally, leadership development. And to my level of awareness, leadership development has not been ingrained within a treatment and a recovery modality until now. And I think this is the perfect context, the perfect environment, the perfect setting for leadership development. So real quickly, what we're going to do, we're going to start out at a 30,000-foot aerial view, and then we're going to get down into the details. The trait-based model of recovery consists of 40 lessons, and those 40 lessons can be divided into 8 modules, and you can see the progression here. And module number 1 is entitled, Who Am I? Because quite honestly, that is a foundational question. And trait-based is unlike traditional recovery approaches. And I'm sure many of you know that before 1938, if you would have told your doctor or someone that you can't stop drinking, that you've got a drug or alcohol problem, the primary modality is going to be a full frontal lobe lobotomy or electroshock therapy. And then fortunately, something beautiful was brought into this world through the creation of Alcoholics Anonymous in 1938, 1939. And it's saved and impacted and transformed countless lives. And we've learned a lot in 80 plus years. And one of the things that we have learned as a people group, as a society, is this. Anytime that we label parts of ourselves, and I'm not throwing shade at all toward any other approach, just follow me here for just a moment because I've lived this, you've lived this. Anytime we label parts of ourselves as defective, what we process internally is that there are entire parts of ourselves that are completely unacceptable. And it initiates this internal war. Because we've got parts of ourselves we want others to see. We've got parts that we're embarrassed of. Another thing that we've learned, and so we fracture, right? Trait-based seeks wholeness and healing. We don't label anything as defective. We don't label anything as good or bad. We simply acknowledge it all, accept it, learn to forgive, and move forward using our traits in the positive fashion. Another thing that we've learned is whatever you focus on, you give energy to. And whatever you focus on intensifies. And I remember countless times in my life where I tried to annihilate and eliminate my obsessiveness and my compulsion, and it never worked. Those things only got worse. And so we're going to start from strength through the trait-based model recovery. That's why Module 1 is called Who Am I? We learn that we're more than our past, we're more than our behaviors, we're more than our choices, and sometimes we can't just rewire our thinking. We've got to understand, and this process of transformation leads us to this understanding that we're more than who we thought we were, more than meets the eye. Module number 2 is the Shadowlands, and so the Shadowlands is where a lot of healing takes place. We're going to look at the Shadowlands. All of us here today are going to take a little short trip through the Shadowlands today, and you're going to see something about these traits that maybe you've never seen before. Then in Module 3, self-leadership. So we begin with internal leadership. We have lessons on critical thinking and self-care and conflict resolution. And then in Module 4, in finding balance, there's classes in there, there's lessons in there, on meditation and mindfulness and intuitive eating and joyful movement, right? Then in Module 5, we journey into community because we are seeking to establish a meaningful connection to others, right? And then in Module 6, that's our leadership module. And then, of course, in Module 7, that's our professionalism module. We've got lessons on networking, professionalism. We've even got, in Module 8 on entrepreneurship, we've got a compass that allows and informs people on, like, if they want to start a business, this is how you do it. These are the steps. And we don't limit entrepreneurship to just business. It can be volunteer efforts. It can be starting a community organization. It can be anything that is self-directed, creative, and innovative. And so I just want to show you real quickly some of our graduates. We launched the trait-based model recovery in the summer of 2023, and we launched it at the very same treatment center I showed up to in 2013. In 2013, I showed up with nothing but a trash bag of clothes. That's all I had. I had no self-respect. I had no relationships. I had no job, no possessions. I barely even had a life. It was all in shambles. But this time, nearly 10 years to the date, I show up to the front doors again, but this time with more than a trash bag of clothes. I had a team of mental health professionals ready to launch and deploy a life-transforming modality. And these precious people are part of those first graduating classes. You can see it's a very good representation. In the bottom right, I want to draw your attention real quickly to Betsy. Betsy has since become a very good friend of Amanda and I, but she's from Louisville, and she was in treatment, and she's a great artist. She loves art. She's a very, very creative person. And in her addiction, she lost that joy. She lost that love. She lost that desire. And then while she was in treatment in the trait-based program, she rediscovered that quality and that desire and that passion. And the shirt that we're holding up, Betsy drew that tree, and you're going to see in just a moment what that tree represents. It's the tree of traits. But she drew the tree, and it became part of our logo now. And so that kind of represents what trait-based is all about. Again, these are some other graduating classes that we've assembled. The upper left corner is that's a community presentation that I did in my hometown of Middlesboro, Kentucky. It was in the mall, and they turned the former arcade into a meeting space. So I was really pumped up that I mapped out or filled up Bailey's Arcade in my adulthood. So that was a significant moment. Since we launched the trait-based model recovery, we have been implemented in 23 organizations across 5 states. And in fact, the picture right there in the middle, that's the Albuquerque, New Mexico District Attorney's Office. And they called me. They reached out to me in the summer of 2023. And quite honestly, when I seen that I got a call from the Albuquerque District Attorney's Office, it kind of startled me a little bit. I didn't answer it right away. They left a message. I called them back. And it turns out they weren't looking for me for anything like that. They had heard about the trait-based model recovery, and they wanted to use it as part of their pretrial diversion program. And what they told us, they said, Dr. Roop, like, nothing's working for us. In this pretrial diversion program, people are not incarcerated. They're not in a facility. They're living their own lives, but they're able to go through trait-based. Anyway, we went out there, we signed the agreement, and those people in the pretrial diversion program, once they complete trait-based, so they go through the curriculum, and once a week we have a virtual meeting for a couple hours with them. It's my team and them, usually about 25 in a cohort. We've seen over 100 graduate from that program, and they were so well pleased with what Trait-Based delivered that they renewed their contract in year 2 and committed to doubling the amount of people that goes through the program. And then they just again renewed their contract for this upcoming year this week, and they're going to double down on their commitment. So it's working. It's working. And so this is really, there's some other pictures there at the bottom that show some more of our graduates. Now, what I want to show you, now we're going to kind of dive in a little bit closer now to the weeds, to the details. So when I say that people in addiction make highly effective leaders or are highly effective leaders, like, I get a second glance sometimes. There's sometimes that people will say, well, you've lost your mind. There's no way that people in addiction are great leaders. And I know that not everybody says that, and I know that you guys get it. I think you agree. And here's what happens. These traits, like I said earlier, have been hijacked and they've been sabotaged, and they are expressed in ways which are negative. It's their shadow expression. I already gave you an example of determination, right? That's of course, my decision to, once I left jail, to return to getting high was not the best decision, but there is a theme, a foundational current of determination there. Look at empathy. So empathy is the number one leadership trait according to the literature. Organizations want leaders who are highly empathetic. And you all know the difference between empathy and sympathy. And empathy is actually entering into the difficulty or the struggles with someone else. It's this ability to establish a strong bond with someone. Well, people in addiction often have that. We can walk into a room and we can kind of read the room, and we can find someone that in active addiction, someone that we think that would be a good ally, somebody that can help us. I remember when I was living, this is like probably year 15 in active addiction, and I always said that I would never, ever, ever be an IV drug user. And without going into the story, right, I was working for Rolls-Royce. I was getting pills shipped to me from Florida, thousands of Lorcets and Xanax and Somas. And I had a great job. I was the global logistics supervisor for Rolls-Royce North America. And but what I was getting pills shipped from doctors in Florida that were being delivered to the cross dock at Rolls-Royce in Indianapolis. That was not part of my job description. But what we were able to determine, and what I was able to understand through those experiences, and what I was able to take away, when the pills dried up, they passed the Ryan Haight Act, I had no more supply, but I still had the desire. So I remember ordering a pizza one afternoon, and the guy that come to the door to deliver the pizza, there was a radar within me. And some of you know what I'm talking about. I was like, this guy's cool. Yeah, not just because he's got a bacon deluxe pizza. There's more. And sure enough, I just asked him the question, do you know where to get anything? And he was like, yeah, I can get heroin. I was like, yeah, but don't you have to shoot that up? He said, yeah. I said, okay. And things began to really crumble at that point. But I share that story to share this. There is an ability, call it a superpower if you will. But many of us in addiction, and it's not limited to addiction, but it's prominent in addiction. We have this ability to connect. We have this radar. But what happens in active addiction is that empathy is then sabotaged, and what we do is we objectify the other person and manipulate them to get what we want. We could not be successful manipulators unless we first had this underlying trait of empathy. And so this is what people have missed for so long. And you just go down the list, there's other shadows. There's more than one shadow per trait. Tenacity, right? The ability to stand firm. That can turn into stubbornness. Creativity, right? The shadow form of creativity is avoidance or detachment. You can just go right on down the list. There's all kinds of examples. Emotional intelligence becomes avoidance or insensitivity. And so, here we go. What you're looking at now is the triangle of transformation. And what this represents is, if you can imagine, on the left side of the triangle where it says the con side, this represents when addiction has come in and it is manipulating these traits that we have. It is using these traits so that the addiction can thrive. So like we said earlier, it's where, determination, we become determined toward the wrong outcomes. Our empathy becomes manipulation, and our resiliency becomes denial. And that's what is represented here in this triangle. On the left side is when our traits are bound and sabotaged and manipulated. But on the right side of the triangle, this is when our traits begin to empower us. Remember, what you focus on, you give energy to. And if we can just get the needle, if you will, imagine in the middle there's like a little gauge like you have on the speedometer. If we can get it over here to the right side, that's when these traits begin to serve us. It's when they begin to empower us. And we need something. We need something to help us to know how to get the needle over to the right side. And we have something. I present to you the tree of traits. Looks absolutely nothing like a tree. I've been told it looks either like a carnival ride or a peacock. And so I'm not so sure about that. It's my PowerPoint skills on full display. But if you can imagine for just a moment, if you will, a tree is going to be the strongest in the middle at the trunk. That's where it's the most stable. And the further you go out on the limbs, it becomes less stable. It becomes wobbly. And this is a great illustration for all of life, and it's a great illustration for how we can not only use and optimize our traits, but how our traits can lead us through life. And here's exactly how this works. I'm going to give you an example. April 2023. I had been selected to present at the RX Summit in Atlanta, Georgia. A big conference for addiction programs and professionals, and I was presenting on the trait-based model of recovery. It was at a breakout session, and it was well attended, and here's the thing. At the time, all I had was the research and the idea. And this is important. I didn't have a curriculum. I didn't have a guidebook. I didn't have assessments. I didn't have a workbook. I didn't have anything but the research, the name, and the idea. But as I began to share what trait-based is, began to share about the traits and their shadows and the tree of traits and the archetypes, the heroes of recovery that you're just about to hear about as well, as I went through that, it resonated with people because I'm telling you, we've known this for a long time. Now we've just got vocabulary for it. And so it came up to the Q&A, nearly after an hour presentation. And they had a microphone sitting in the room, and it was, like I said, packed. And I'm not embellishing this story at all, but during the Q&A, people came up from the microphone to the back of the room, and it lined around to the side. And I was like, wow, this is cool. And the first person that came up to the microphone said this. Said, Dr. Roop, we love the trait-based model recovery. When can we get our hands on it and implement it at our organization? Being the good entrepreneur that life had taught me to be, I knew that I shouldn't respond with, well, I don't know. I'm glad you like it, but I don't really have a curriculum. I don't have a guidebook. I don't have a workbook. If you'll just leave your email, I'll get back to you whenever those things are ready. I knew better, So I leaned into the mic and I said the first thing that came to my mind. I said, 90 days. Oh gosh. So I had just committed myself to developing a full psychosocial educational modality for addiction treatment in 90 days. So, thank you. So I came back to Kentucky and went to work. And so I knew what was missing. I knew what was missing from my lived experience, and I knew what was missing from my work in the field. And so I knew that a lot of these treatment centers were strapped with staffing and scheduling. And not only that, I knew like a large component of what was being neglected. And it was kind of cased around this understanding of the trait. So I knew that we needed videos to go with each lesson, and like I said, guidebooks, workbooks, the full kit and caboodle. I had 3 full-time jobs, and I got to work and put everything into the trait-based model recovery, meaning that first of all, I ordered a camcorder, and I didn't know if they still make camcorders, and they do, by the way. If you're looking to make videos, they still sell them on Amazon. And so I made a makeshift studio, right, in our home, essentially. And I started writing the curriculum, and I started going through the lessons, and I began to just pour my heart and my soul in this. And I'm not an extrovert. Like, making these videos, it's not like I have no reservations. I can just throw it all out there. Like, this was hard for me. This was hard for us. And so I remember one evening, and I was working probably 16, 18, sometimes more hours a day. And I remember one evening, Amanda said to me, and I will never forget this. We're there in the living room, and she said, "Jason, where's your joy?" And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, you're normally very lighthearted, you're very joyful, very jubilant and smiling. She said, but lately you've just been so stressed out. You just got this scowl on your face. You're so burdened down. And she said this, guys, and I'll never forget it. And she said, "Jason, don't you know that the trait-based model recovery must be built with love?" And when she said that, it was like time stood still. I was like, immediately, you're exactly right. Absolutely, you're right. And what had happened in that moment, if you look down the grit path, I score high on grit, resilience, determination, and tenacity. I was really running on all cylinders when it comes to grit. But I was neglecting grace. I was neglecting time with family. I was neglecting rest. I was neglecting some of these other aspects of life, the appreciation, the empathy, the bonds with others. And so while I was doing that, I was out of balance. And look, quite honestly, even though I was building something that was going to help a lot of people across the nation, I was as close to a relapse then as I've ever been. And when Amanda said that, it brought me back home. That's why you see that trait, self-awareness. There's little white arrows, right, that all point back to self-awareness. That's the foundational trait on the path of balance, right? And like I said earlier, there's no judgment in trait-based. Someone could just as easily, and I could as well, get lost down the grace path. And what happens in those instances, there's no judgment because we've been led by compassion. We've been led by love. But what happens when we get out of balance, we lose our identity into the identity of another person. We become people pleasers. The way we teach this in the trait-based model recovery is that we can always return home to the path of balance through the trait of self-awareness. We teach that and suggest that being carried out in a multitude of forms. For example, 30 seconds of mindfulness, of following the breath. And trait-based is a universal model. It's open to people of all backgrounds, people of all faiths or no faith, doesn't matter. And we teach them, you can be grocery shopping or you can be driving and just focus on the right here, the right now. Just follow the breath, meditate, pray, whatever it may be, just maybe 60 seconds, because that 60 seconds will do a great deal of good, especially when our minds are in the past and we're full of shame and guilt, or when our mind is in the future and we don't know what to anticipate and we're full of dread and fear. We come back home through the trait of self-awareness. And look, when we've done that, when we've practiced this just a few times, you look at the trait above that next, it's emotional intelligence. Do you remember that needle? Now it's on the right side. Now we become managers of our lives, and we're practicing this emotional intelligence. And then above that is authenticity. And the reason it's above that is because once we are able to successfully know who we are and know how our emotions are lined up, we can then be our authentic selves for perhaps the first time in a very, very long time. We can drop the mask, we can drop living to the expectations of others, and we can live as we were meant to live. And then finally, that top trait, the crown jewel of the trait-based model recovery, is creativity. What I was able to do with creativity, I was able to go back and say, okay, the laptop shuts down at 7 p.m. I've got to rest. I've got to spend more time. Amanda and I, we have date night every Saturday night ever since summer 2023. And so, I do want to share that we were able to launch the trait-based model recovery precisely 88 days after I made that commitment. And if any of you want to know how the Tree of Traits came about, I'll be glad to share that with you afterwards. It actually came about in a time of meditation. So not only is it a tool that helps us on the recovery path, but it also can be used as a problem-solving tool. Lindsay mentioned it in the introduction, but we've also got the trait-based model of prevention, which helps students better navigate difficult emotions. We're going to talk about that more in just a moment, but this is another way this tool can be used, using our grit and our grace to understand what the problems are, using self-awareness. It's a 4-step problem-solving approach. Self-awareness, like where am I at today? What's going on? Why is there a problem? And then using emotional intelligence to assess how we are doing and how others involved in this scenario are doing. And then responding in step 3 in authenticity, true to our values. And then number 4, using creativity as a path forward. Now, the heroes of recovery. The ruler, the enchanter, the champion, and the lover. These are all archetypes. And so I'm sure many of you know what archetypes are, and we're kind of picking up on the Jungian stream here, that there's this invisible, unknown influence on our lives. You know, there's these archetypes like the damsel in distress or the hero, right? The old wise man, that's another archetype. And it's a suggestion that the collective unconscious, there's something that can influence our day-to-day. We can wake up one day and be more prone to think and behave in a certain pattern. These are all about patterns, delivered in such an understandable way, right? And the way that we teach it through trait-based, through our videos, through the guidebook, through the workbook, simply is this. All 4 of these characters represent characteristics within us. But on any given day, either the light expression of these heroes can be demonstrated, or the shadow expression of these heroes can be demonstrated. And so our purpose is to seek balance, to establish this balance within, and to begin to use that understanding to establish boundaries as well in recovery. So let's talk about it here. The lover. So, and let me say one other thing before we move forward. This assessment is not static. It's a dynamic assessment. It is meant to be taken and read and understood as a reflection of how you're doing the moment you take the assessment. Clients take the assessment every 2 weeks, sometimes more. Amanda and I take it probably every 2 weeks because it's a valid tool. It's not just like something fun to do. That was an intentional effort on our part. We didn't want to just make it a novelty. This is a very useful tool that we can use in recovery and in prevention. So it's dynamic. So the lover, right? And of course, how you score on your trait. You guys are just about to be able to take your very own trait assessment here in just a moment. It's going to rank for you your leadership traits, all the 10 that we've discussed in order of prominence. Additionally, tell you which hero best reflects you today, right? And so the lover is emotionally attuned. The lover is very compassionate. We're talking about the light side. When a lover is balanced, right, they're very warm to others. They bring warmth to wounded places. They help other people feel seen or heard. And the shadow lover, however, becomes a people pleaser. They become consumed with the ideas and opinions of others on themselves, and they get lost up into their emotions or codependency, right? And they lash out maybe perhaps when they feel threatened. And so if I take the assessment today and it shows that I'm the lover, this lets me know what I need to pay attention to today or the next few days. It's so very helpful and beneficial. And by the way, lover is the most popular hero of the heroes of the recovery journey. And you'll see in just a moment, well, I'll tell you more. The champion. So the champion, right? Everybody needs a champion in their corner. Every organization needs a champion. The champion is resilient and driven, and the champion is the protector, right? The one who fights for what matters. And you know a champion. Perhaps you are a champion. You hate to see somebody picked on. You hate to see people that you love discarded and frowned upon and despised and mistreated, right? That's the champion in you. And that's quality that is golden. But when the champion, the shadow champion, emerges on any given day, when the shadow champion emerges, they forget about peace and they start fighting everything. It's this attempt to control everything outside of us, right? The shadow champion begins to become forceful and begins to maybe sometimes get burned out. And the champion, the shadow champion as well, can have bouts of rage and anger issues. So if I take the assessment today, it says that I'm a champion. I know what my good qualities are. I know what my strengths are. And I also know what my shadows are. And so if I'm the champion today, I need to be mindful of maybe my attempts to try to control things that are way beyond my control. All right? The ruler. The ruler brings order and structure and clarity in midst of confusion and chaos. Of course, naturally, organizations need rulers who are able to bring about this understanding and this clarity, right? But the shadow ruler, when the shadow ruler emerges, the shadow ruler becomes a micromanager. Again, they, like the champion, are trying to control everything, and they perhaps become vulnerable to their attempts to try to make everybody happy, right? And the ruler begins to not only micromanage, but begins to obsess over the minute details that don't really matter, driving themselves insane. The enchanter. Man, I love enchanters. Every organization needs an enchanter. You're going to find an enchanter usually in the sales department or the business development department. The enchanter's really good with words, right? They're very charismatic. Everybody loves the enchanter. They're very knowledgeable. The enchanter, if you can think of like a magician, the enchanter you can be feeling so down on any given day. And if there's an enchanter in your network, you're going to be joyful. You're going to be happy. It's going to turn on a dime just like that. That's the gift of the enchanter. But the shadow enchanter will help you find the $20 they stole from you. The shadow enchanter begins to manipulate. Remember, we were using empathy earlier. The shadow enchanter begins to manipulate, and they can fall into fantasy and escape reality, right? And they manipulate through charm, and they avoid the tough inner work that's often required for true transformation. So, are you guys ready to discover your inner hero. If you can scan this, you should be, no. If you could scan this, I'm going to give you about 8 to 10 minutes to complete the assessment. All you're to do is just answer the questions honestly and openly. There's no right or wrong answers. Answer it as you wish. And there's also, I've got the website address up here if you're not accustomed to or familiar with scanning, or if you just want to jot it down for recollection for the future. Give it probably a couple more minutes. Take your time. As you're responding to these questions, I'm just going to tell you a little more about what we do with these assessment results. So we have clients taking this assessment every 2 weeks. They're also taking the PHQ-9 and the GAD-7. Which I'm going to show you in just a minute, the data outcomes for that. But every time a client takes the assessment, and you'll see it today too, you're going to get a full PDF report sent to your email that defines and describes your traits and lists them in order of prominence, and also which hero of the recovery journey best matches you. Now, something that you'll not see likely is that you're going to see your top archetype. From the perspective of the client, they just see what's number one. They don't see all four. As administrators of the program, and so this can be case managers, this can be clinicians or peer support specialists, if requested, they can see on the back end the tally between all four archetypes. And what we've discovered experientially, and we're going to validate this through clinical assessments and future studies, but what we're discovering is when the distance between the top archetype and the bottom archetype is more than 20 points, when the deviation exceeds 20 points, it is an indication that extra intervention is needed. When the distribution is less than 20 points, it's a sign that internal balance has been established. And this is according to the clinicians and the therapists. It's what we are observing on the day-to-day, and we're going to continue to validate that. But as attendees or as people taking the assessment, you're going to see what the top one is. Is anybody done with the assessment yet? Okay. We'll give it another 2 minutes, and then we're going to do a poll. Okay, we're going to go ahead and kind of pick up from here. But let's see, a show of hands. How many lovers out here? Wow. Yeah. Any champions? Awesome. Rulers? Oh, that's great. Where's my enchanters at? The enchanter is historically the least hero or archetype. And that's because the enchanter hides within and behind the other heroes. So you may be an enchanter, you just don't know it yet. So as you discover that, that's fascinating. And so does anybody want to share anything for just a couple quick seconds before we move on about what that revelation or understanding has signaled to you? And before we move forward, we'll have a Q&A at the end here in just a moment. But all right, so we're mostly lovers in here. I got that right? All right. Well, me too. So let's move forward. The DARE program worked for me. I didn't touch a drug all through school. I didn't get high, I didn't drink any alcohol, I didn't smoke a cigarette, I barely even went to school dances. And the reason for that, like, irregardless of my background, but I was really scared to death. I thought if I got high, my brain would fry in a skillet. And so, like, I didn't experiment. I was a good boy. And then I graduated and moved away and went to college. And when I was in college, I was a walk-on at the tennis team. I joined a fraternity. And I remember in the summer of 1996, someone handed me 2 pills, 2 Xanax. I'd never taken a drug before, barely even taken a Tylenol. And when I took those 2 pills, it was as though the gates of heaven had opened up for me. And let me explain that. Because, I was the youngest out of 4 boys. I'd always tried to fit in and belong all through school. Everywhere that I was in, I was always trying to gain acceptance, right? And that was an underlying drive and desire in my life. And so when I joined the fraternity, when I started I took that identity on. And when I took those 2 pills, all the internal pressure that had built up for 19 years suddenly was alleviated and eliminated, resolved and remedied. And for me, that was magic. And I thought I was the exception to the rule. But it would take me 17 years, arrested 18 times, homelessness, to realize that I wasn't the exception to the rule. So why do I share that story? It's because of this. Whenever we were creating the trait-based model recovery, it kept coming back to me, this is going to be so good in high schools and middle schools. Because it does way more than just scaring children to death. And look, we know the dangers of drugs. We absolutely need to share and to continue that messaging that, yeah, drugs are dangerous. But we can do so much more when it comes to prevention. And so when we were building the trait-based model of prevention, I knew that we were going to do it in about 5 years down the road. But I had a superintendent in Central Kentucky. He had heard about the trait-based model recovery, was very studious and kind of the academic type, and he looked through it and said, Jason, or Dr. Roop, can you please build something for our kids here at Taylor County High School, trait-based model prevention? And I said, yeah, give me 90 days and I'll do it. So we rolled it out, and what we do through the trait-based model prevention is we don't just focus upon fear. Fear is not our primary tool, it's not a tool at all. We discard fear, and instead we move forward with love, and we help students to better navigate difficult emotions, to learn who they are, to build healthy relationships, to cultivate these leadership traits within. And so we rolled out the pilot program last year at Taylor County in Central Kentucky, and we did it with 100 students. It went so well there that they're doubling it for this upcoming year. We got another high school that is going to be doing trait-based prevention for all freshmen, all seniors. We are doing a summer program in Boyle County, Kentucky, where there's 200 youth that are going through the trait-based model prevention, then have an option to go through horseback riding, archery, karate, or theater, right? This activity combined with mentors. Bottom line, we went from 100 last year to we're going to have over 1,000 students in trait-based prevention this year. And they love it. And there's an alternative high school. There's several students in that alternative high school in Taylor County. When we shared that curriculum and that understanding with them, that they absolutely have these qualities within that's there. And it's not just me filling your head full of psychological hubble bubble, but this is science, right? This is truth. And sharing with these students that they have not only worth and value, but superpowers within. Their eyes light up. We knew it would take off, but I'm telling you what we have experienced, observed, and seen, it is life transforming. And it really could bring tears to my eyes, and I'll just keep moving forward here. But what we're seeing is a continuum of strength, right? We have curriculum from 7th grade to 12th grade, and it starts out with the Who I Am Becoming workbook, going all the way up to the Leaders workbook. And we can see here that it's a full ecosystem, right, that is built upon identity formation and emotional intelligence and leadership and peer mentorship, and it's really been going really well. Here's some pictures of some of our students. Again, over 1,000 that we're going to have for this upcoming year. And so it's developing an entire modality that begins, we want to eventually go down to elementary school and on through college, that it becomes a leadership laboratory. It's a paradigm buster. We're not examining our lives from behavior, but from traits. And so why bring trait-based to campus? And so it is a natural fit, the trait-based model recovery on college campuses. I worked for 10 years at a university in Central Kentucky. My wife Amanda has too as well. We created programs, workforce education programs, and we seen it on the day-to-day, what was missing. And these students wanted a connection to thrive in community. And so this is what trait-based can deliver, right? It's fully online, for one thing. It is all the content, the curriculum, the PDF versions of the guidebooks are all completely accessible online. It's a very flexible modality. We can customize it. It can fit right into any context that's required or necessary. And it also meets students right where they are. And so every student receives a user ID and a password, and we have an app, the trait-based app. So it immediately, on day one, creates this connectivity, right, that allows for not only connection to take place, but to the cultivation of these traits and the development of leadership skills and abilities. And so it can be either facilitator-led, peer-led, or self-guided. And universities, I know, are so focused on engagement and retention. And this is exactly what trait-based can deliver, even more so that our starting point is not just simply doing the best that we can. Our starting point is strength. So this is an approach which, honestly, this trait-based is cross-cutting. It's effective for other demographics and people with other mood disorders, personality disorders. It's good overall for all of life. And so real quickly, what is it? Essentially 40 lessons accessible online, builds upon these leadership traits that we have. Every person receives not only the curriculum, the guidebooks, workbooks, and assessments, but other tools as well that they need in life. Last thing, and I'm going to close it out here, the data. 71.5% reduction in depression, 58.5% reduction in anxiety, 97.1 program completion rate, and we've got a publication, a published study coming out on July the 9th by the 5th most popular journal in the world with 14 million readers each month. Scientific reports. Like I said earlier, I don't come from an academic family. Grandfather, a coal miner, dad, a 6th grade education. But the trait-based model recovery will be published in a Q1 journal in just a few days. We did a study, and we started with 425 people that were in traditional treatment. I want to make sure I have time here. We started with 425, right? This is a comparative study. We had no idea what to expect. All that we were measuring was anxiety and depression, and we really didn't intend to capture this data on the back end of completion rates, but it emerged and presented itself, and it's astronomical. 425 people come into treatment, in residential treatment and IOP, right? And then 139 were randomly selected to go to the trait-based model recovery group. What that looked like practically in residential care, between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m., most people, 425, were going through traditional curriculum like Living in Balance or the Matrix model. 139 were going to the trait-based class. Well, what we heard while that was going on is that people were lined up for trait-based even before 8 a.m., before the doors even opened. And so after the end of 90 days, what we seen and what we discovered, that group that started with 425 was left with only 66. The trait-based group that started with 139 was left with 135. And I don't have to tell you the importance of that. We can throw out terms like engagement, retention, and completion, but what that means simply is this: it saves lives. The longer we can keep people in treatment, the longer we can keep people connected to recovery, the better our chances as a society, the better chances that our loved ones have and our friends and our neighbors have of being successful in life, of thriving, finding these superpowers within. Couple quotes real quickly. This is Z from Albuquerque. She's in the pretrial diversion program. She said, "Without the incredible trait-based model recovery, I'd still be trapped in the shame and guilt that traditional recovery models labeled me with. I would still be searching for a way forward, desperate for a way out of the alcoholic shell that once confined me, but my mind is free now. Thank you to the Center for Trait-Based Transformation." Bill Holland, a peer support specialist. "From the moment the trait-based model was presented to us, I was sold. After 41 years of being exposed to different recovery approaches, this surpasses everything I've encountered. It's truly transformative." And real quickly, I want to point to this. We are accepting applications for pilot locations for college campuses this upcoming year. It's going to be the perfect tool, the perfect fit. If you'd like to know more, get with me or Amanda afterwards, and we will discuss those details. And trait-based is so affordable. It's almost laughable at the cost of what it is. And so it is accessible, affordable, transformative, and the next chapter starts with strength. We've learned a lot in over 80 years. And we've learned that what's inside is gold, quite honestly and quite frankly. We're excited to be here. We're excited to roll out this modality across the nation from prevention to recovery. And we are so especially excited and honored to be here with you today, to partner with you, to help you to discover your inner hero, because everybody is a hero. And so, I'd like to open it up. I do appreciate you. I thank you for your time, your attention. You have been so kind. Thank you. Yeah, I think we do. If you've got a question, we've got a microphone that, yep.
Let me test. Is it working? Okay.
Thank you very much. Just a quick question. So you mentioned the 40 lessons. I'm curious what the kind of time frame of each of those lessons
Great.
would take. And you alluded at cost, if you might say a few words on what it actually is.
Thank you. Yeah. This is my entrepreneurship coming through. The lessons consist of, every lesson has a video. A video is about 20 minutes. And that's supplementary. There's also a guidebook, which is going to be the learning part, and the workbook. I've actually got a copy of the workbook up here. If anybody wants to see it, Amanda can hold it up. And I've got a few prevention workbooks. That's the application and the practical component. Trait-based model recovery is billable for psychosocial education through codes H2027 and H0004 for up to 80 hours collectively. So each lesson, about 2 hours, will cover about 2 hours of billing time. And the cost essentially is about $150 a person. Yep. And what's included with that, let me reiterate this. So every person that is in trait-based, they get access to the online platform. They get a guidebook, a physical copy of the guidebook, a physical copy of the workbook, the full kit and caboodle, access to all the assessments, the assessment reports. It's really an incredible bargain. Yes.
Love this model, love this whole idea. I'm excited to dig into it more. I'm curious about if there's, I'm sure there's been some kind of cross-referencing with other tools such as like the Clifton Strengths or Myers-Briggs or different things like that, and I'm just curious what you have to say about that.
Yeah, we do pull from various camps, like I mentioned earlier, like IFS. We've got a lesson, and it's not called reparenting, but that's kind of what comes through. It's kind of like seeking this inner wholeness and the holistic healing. So it is, in the publication, that our data right now is an embargo. I couldn't show any slides of it today until the publication comes out on July the 9th, but I invite you to read that, and it's got kind of the theoretical development that shows where we pull from some Jungian psychology, some IFS, some positivist psychology, as well as some of those other modalities. And so yes, Zach, it's an amalgamation of different not only approaches and philosophies, but it's combined in a way that is not only accessible and transformative, but really, really therapeutically beneficial.
Any other questions?
Yeah, would I?
Thank you.
Would you ever consider a high school study?
Oh, well, would I? Yeah, absolutely, we would. Yes. Yeah, we've got 1,000 students coming up this fall. I would safely accept probably up to maybe about 500 to 600 more students, because we want to make sure it's really, really we are able to successfully follow the data, and we want to make it a very good.
We have like 15 at our.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, we would love to. Yeah, absolutely. We would definitely be able to. And the thing about it is we can do the training, the certification for any peer support, clinicians, administration, quite swiftly and quite effectively. And there's some guidebooks up there as well if you want to thumb through those. Yeah, we are still accepting.
So thank you. It's sort of the same question that she asked. Nafisa Downs from New Jersey, Recovery High School, Raymond J. Lesniak. So kind of sort of the same question is, do you have any thoughts about how this translates for youth and adolescents in academic spaces in recovery?
Yeah.
And do you offer technical assistance?
Yeah.
So the program, and how do we get your assistance with that?
Yeah, no, we do. It's 24/7 support, so you would get access to all the updates and the training. So you would have a direct line with us. And your first question, remind me what was the first part of the question?
If this is transferable to Recovery High Schools.
Oh yeah,
that's
absolutely.
where I am.
Yeah, and yes, it is, most definitely. The data also that we're collecting from school administrators are attendance rates. Attendance is improving, grades are improving, and we actually kind of have the pilot already at an alternative high school. That's what last year, a significant portion of those 100 students were in kind of like the alternative setting for high school. And so they absolutely gravitate towards it. The outcomes are very positive and beneficial, not only in terms of like risk behavior, but it's also helped bring about some very positive developments when it comes to academics, community engagement, and of course, there's other things we measure, self-esteem and the resilience scale. Those are also trending upwards. So yes, absolutely. It kind of correlates into all of those areas. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I had a question on the archetypes. Is those plotted along an X and Y axis by any chance?
What's that?
The archetypes, are they plotted along an X and Y axis? Like, can you just kind of like eyeball it, so to speak, with before? I mean, the data is going to be more robust when they go through the questionnaire and everything like that. But like, is there a way to like, oh, they're more in this category, they're more in this category, and have like a single question differentiator between those?
Yeah, and I can show you if you want to look. I've got the scoring sheet. So of course, all of those traits in those questions are assigned to different archetypes, and so that's kind of how that's determined. It would be through the responses to the various questions, and then an aggregate total to show which archetype or hero has received the most traits, right? That's essentially what it's doing. And so, yeah, I'll be glad to show that to you. I've got it up here if you want to see that scoring sheet, which shows how we went through. And it's a Likert scale. We used a Likert scale for all the questions. Obviously, you've seen that. And when it comes to scoring, the same thing.
Any last questions? All right, well, can we give Dr. Roop a round of applause? Thank you very much.